Hi, everyone. This is Tracy at the Fairborn branch of the Greene County Public Library. Today, we're going to be talking about census records and going beyond the basic census to continue your genealogy research. So let me go ahead and I can share my screen with you. And we can get started. So on the first screen, I just have my name and the website in case you guys can't get the handouts or the link's not working. There's another link you can click on or type in to get to the handouts for this, which you're kind of going to want because it has some really cool information in it. So there's a few terms we need to understand as we're going through census, different forms of censuses. Enumerate it means it was counted or recorded or documented. Enumerator is the person doing the counting and the recording. District is where people live. The census date is also the as of date. This was the official date of the census. So it may be April 1st is the official date of the census, but the enumeration date may have happened in July. That's when the person actually got to the house and talked to the people. On the top of all of the forms, they'll have those two different dates, so you'll know exactly when the information was collected. Now, there's a lot of different types of census records and schedules that the government has collected over the years. The most common are the federal censuses. Those include the population schedule. This is the one most people think of when they think of census records. It's the one's completed every 10 years. It's released after 72 years. And large portions of the 1890 census were missing due to the big fire that took out a lot of records. You'll hear me refer to the fire as we continue because, as I said, it took out a lot of records that we may be looking for. Some of the other censuses that people may not know about that the federal government instituted are listed here. Now, some of them were required by all states. Some of them were optional. States were offered money to complete these. Some states opted to do it. Some states didn't. So you'll have to check and see which states, if your state did it or not. The first one we're going to talk about is manufacturing or productive industries. This was for companies, manufacturers, things like that, and if they had to make more than $500 a year. Trade, mercantiles, fisheries, mining, all of that would have been in this. Agricultural censuses, big chunk of them were destroyed in the fire, or after the fire, they found out a lot of the records were missing or destroyed in the fire. So they said, just go ahead and get rid of all of them. Again, check and look. Agricultural censuses were for farms originally that made over $100 per year, but it changed as inflation changed and the rate of currency changed to $500. So your relatives may have been a farmer on the population schedule, but they didn't make enough money to be on the agricultural schedules. Veterans and pensioners schedules. These were people who are receiving pensions from the federal government for their services. Not all the states did these, and not all the states completed them. So you just have to kind of check your area that you're researching and see. Social statistics, this is kind of cool. It's about the neighborhood that your ancestors lived in. It's not person specific, it's area specific. So you can get an idea of the type of religion that was in the area, the schools that were in the area, amount of money people made. So you can get an idea of the environment the person was living in. Were they in an affluent area? Were they in a not so affluent area? Give you an idea of the type of people you were researching. The mortality schedule, again, a lot of it was destroyed in the big fire, and there was also another fire that took out a lot of these. What the mortality schedule is good for is looking up people who passed away during the last 365 days. So you may not be able to find a death record per se, but you may be able to find them on the mortality schedules to know when they passed away. And it also has a lot of information regarding that individual as well. The 1890 special schedule, again, was another one some states chose to do, some didn't. The fire took out a big chunk of it. If you looked at the states alphabetically, half of Kentucky through Wyoming survived. The first half of Kentucky all the way through A did not make it. So you may want to check and see if your ancestors would have been on that as well. It gives you an idea of where to look for military records. There was also the Native American Indian census. This is where they specifically looked at Native Americans to take a census of them. If they were living in what quote unquote traditional environments, such as in towns or in cities, they were included on the population schedule. If they were living on reservations or were nomadic, they were considered non-taxed Indians, and they were not usually enumerated. Often you will find when you're researching this group, they would be listed their race as white because it was easier to pass as white and get through society. So don't be discouraged if you're looking and you see that come up. The slave schedules, this was listed by the owner's name, and usually the enslaved person was just a number, age, and sex. Again, it helps you narrow down times and areas where people were. The censuses started in colonial times, and they usually began with just the men who were able to serve or own property. By 1786, there had already been 46 censuses taken. So if you were here in the colonial times, definitely check that out. You can probably find some information somewhere about your relatives. There were also non-federal censuses taken, like the state census. This is really good for finding people who moved between the federal census years. So like if your family moved in from 1880 to 1900, because there's that big gap because of the fire, state censuses are a good way to look and find out where the people were living and more information about them. There were territorial censuses, just like the state censuses. These people were usually just the head of the house listed, and they were very transient. So if you knew your family moved around a lot and they were out west, quote unquote, during the territorial times, you might be able to find them there. Tax lists are another good place to look at. This was mostly white males because they were the ones owning the property, and everyone had to be enumerated, whether they owned property or were renters. And they listed all their property that had a value and that was taxable. So you could look at and see what kind of physical wealth your family may have had. Voting registers were also kept, city directories. Those are both good for finding relatives to see where they lived, to continue to look for other records like your birth, marriage, death. There were defective, delinquent, and dependent schedules. These were lists of people who obviously wouldn't have been heads of households because they were physically or mentally unable to work, but they had to be recorded somewhere. So check these schedules. Institutional schedules for jails, prisons, asylums, etc. And for the people who were serving on military bases or were on naval ships during the time of censuses, there were also the merchant seaman schedules and the military and Navy forces schedules. So if your uncle or grandfather was serving, but they are not on the census record and you can't find them, check one of these. They may have actually been at a base or a fort when the census was taken. What is the point of me telling you all this? Again, everything you do in genealogy, having more information helps. It can help you find people that you can't find in the regular population schedule, or help you find more information or have different information. One example is if you have your grandfather's birth date is one thing based on a census from the 1900s, but you go back and you find him in the his family in the agricultural or in the slave census, you can find out different dates. It gives you more idea of what their lives were actually like. If you know your family was a cattle farmer out west, they're going to have a very different life than a wheat farmer or a tobacco farmer in Kentucky. It just gives you an idea of what their lives were like to give you a fuller, richer picture. They can also help you narrow down when and where to look for information. Like I said, there's a big 20-year gap between 1880 and 1900 because of the fire. These state censuses, territorial censuses, mortality rate, mortality schedules, all of that can help you narrow down exactly where people were and have a much smaller gap to look and research in. So let's look at a couple of these schedules. This is a manufacturing and industry schedule. As you can see, it's got the name of the corporation, what they did, how much they made, the quantities. So they made logs, what kind of logs, and how much was that worth? What kind of resources they had, employees they had, and their annual productivity. Up here, you also have the official date of the census. You have who collected the census, where it was, when it was. A lot of really good information to help you, and again, get an idea of where your family may have worked or businesses they may have owned. A veteran schedule, there's the person's name, their rank, their company, where they were, discharge, and length of service. This can help you find military records when you go to National Archives or you're actually requesting their military records. You can give them a very specific person, rank, when they served. Makes it a little bit easier to find the records you're looking for. Mortality schedule, again, it has the name, age, sex. This specific one has the birthplace and when they died, their occupation, and the cause of death and how long they were sick. Different states and different places may have different questions because it wasn't, not every census was required to have the same questions asked from state to state. The federal government didn't have a set form yet. It wasn't really until after 1900, 1920, somewhere around in there, that they had a set form that everybody used. Before that, it was kind of up to everybody to come up with their own. So be sure to, when you look, find a blank form or one you can really zoom in on so you can read what these questions are so you can get a very good understanding of the information you're looking at. Defective, dependent, and delinquent schedule. This one is from Pennsylvania in 1880. And it has the person's name, where they are, their disability, how old they are. It just gives you an idea of more people in your family's lives. Agricultural schedule here, you can see that it has like how many horses they had, how many cattle they had, how many pigs they had, wheat they grew. Just to give you an idea, a fuller picture of their daily lives. The pensioner schedule is a lot like the other one the other military schedule we looked at, their names, their rank, ages. Social statistics, again, this is for the area. It gives you an idea of how many people live there, the schools, what was manufactured, what was grown. Is it a rural area that was mostly farming? Is it industrial, mostly in town with factories? This will give you a good idea of the area your family was in. The Indian or Native American census, again, it would just have the state, the town, who collected the information, when it was done, and then the person, the age, the tribe, etc. The slave schedule, again, it was by the owner's name, unfortunately, and then it would list how many enslaved people they had, how old they were, the sex, and any other information they had regarding them. So where can you find these glorious records? You can check the National Archives. That's a good place to start. Your state archives, Ancestry and Family Search. It's not the main census record, but when you do your filtering on the left side, you can usually find some of these other ones. Historical societies are a great place to go to. Your libraries are great. And at this website here, the census.gov, They have a lot of blank census forms, so you can zoom in and see what the questions are. And they also have them listed by decade. So if you're looking for what censuses were taken during 1830, you can go click on the 1830 box and see what censuses were collected. That helps you find out what you should be looking for. So it doesn't exactly have links to the specific filled out ones that would have your ancestor's name in it, but it does give you an idea of what to look for. Please remember, don't use your census record as your only proof for when somebody was born. There were a lot of errors that could have happened. People didn't give information correctly. They didn't hear it correctly. It wasn't written down correctly. They couldn't spell the information. Just be careful. Make sure you confirm what you find with other documents. Boundaries change. States changed, counties changed, and it happened quite regularly. So make sure you look in both places. Typically, the records would usually go to the state archives. So like if you were in Virginia when you were born, but then it turned to West Virginia, your record would still typically be in Virginia. There are some cases, especially with counties, where it physically stayed where you were. So it may still be in West Virginia. You have to check both places to see if you have the right place you're looking for. And remember, things happen. Courthouses burn down, archives burn down. And just make sure you check as many places as you can to see if you can have luck and find your missing information. Some of the records that are listed as complete, like the 1900s census, federal census, should be complete, but there are things that happen. Neighborhoods may have been missed, streets may have been missed, the film may have been damaged, the paper may have been ripped, the microfilm may have gotten damaged, the transcriber couldn't read it, it's too dark. Lots of things could happen to make it incomplete, but it's still listed as complete. So don't be surprised if this happens. It's a rarity, but it does happen. Try to use the transcribe feature when you search, where they actually do, the computer looks it up for you and it's typed and nice and pretty, but also make sure you go to the actual document if you can and look at it. It's better to look at things for yourself because transcribers make mistakes. Records are old, they're hard to read, they're missing information. They may just have initials, they may have spellings of names incorrectly. So make sure you check not only the transcribe feature, but also the actual document. And if you can, search the document by the area your family lived in. Let me give you an example. My grandfather lived in this little town in Kentucky. Couldn't find him on a census record forever. Finally found him by scrolling through everyone in the county until I found his sheet with other people living there that we knew. Finally found him about halfway down the page. The transcriber had written his name down as Tammy instead of Thomas because they couldn't read what was written on the sheet of paper. I never would have found him if I had just used the transcribe feature. The only reason I did find him was because I took the time and went through each page individually and looked, just like you would have done with microfilm. So if you can't find something, there's another trick to try to find more of your information. Next up in your handouts, I have a list. Now, this is probably, hopefully complete, but mistakes happen. So don't get horribly upset with me if you find errors. These are state censuses, and I tried to list all of the states with the years that state censuses were collected. So like here, Connecticut, none known to exist. So we don't think they had any. You never know, a city may have done something. And these other ones just have the years that they did them. Again, this is for state censuses, and I went ahead and did them for all. I'm not going to put them in the video because that would just make this super long. Federal population cheat sheet, I did this kind of the same thing. Let's run through one of these for an example. So Alabama, the first 2 years, it was part of Georgia. So you're not going to find an Alabama population schedule for 1790 and 1800. You'd have to look in Georgia. In 1810, they were listed as part of Mississippi. Again, you're not going to find Alabama, so you need to go to Mississippi. Some of the records are available for 1820, but not all. If it has an X, they should be complete. They have some of the records are there, some of them are not. If they are lost, that usually means the fire or a fire or some horrible thing took them out. And if they have dashes, that means that they were not known to exist. Again, I try to do this for every state, but I'm not going to put it in the video here. The colonial censuses, I tried to put in when they were done, if they were done. Some places you had to see different states. Again, you guys can look through that on your own. Questions asked in the censuses, I tried to break this down to different years so you could get an idea of what questions were asked. So if you're specifically looking for information, if it's even going to be on the census you're going to be looking for, or when the first time you might find somebody's wife's name. So I did this for all of the censuses all the way through the current ones. Again, I'm not going to put them all in the video. You can see them in the handouts. And that brings us to the end. So let me stop sharing my screen with you. So hopefully that gives you guys some information and some good places to start researching and looking. And if you have any questions, be sure to visit your local library. Have a great day.